So, dear students, you are welcome in this class. Today, we are going to discuss the role of crop rotations in soil fertility management. This is really very, very important. Crop rotations these days are being talked again. So it is not that Indians or people were not adopting crop rotations. Before the Green Revolution, people were adopting crop rotations very well. Farmers knew the value of crop rotations. They knew the value of fallow lands also. They used to keep their lands fallow for one season so that it gets enriched by fertility. Maybe because of biological nitrogen fixation or by atmospheric deposition of some nitrogenous compounds, or they used to graze their animals in those fallow fields so that animals will leave their excreta in the field. And it was the way to enrich fertility. And they were also growing variety of crops. In Punjab, before Green Revolution, they used to grow more than 16 crops, but now they have come down to less than 8 crops. So it is suggesting that repetition of same kind of crop is more there, but rotation of different crop is not there. So soil fertility is very, very important, as you know, and role of crop rotations is important. So you will learn the meaning, need, and value and advantages of crop rotations. Understand the role of crop rotation in plant nutrition. Crop rotations have various roles. They are important to control the weeds. They are important to control the insect pests and management. So what kind of role can be played by crop rotation in soil fertility and plant nutrition, we are going to discuss. And further, in the end, 2-3 slides I prepared on the role of legumes in soil fertility management. So let us start with the simple terminology, cropping systems. So there is very typical definition of cropping system in agronomic terminology. And I think I read it several times and I could not understand the meaning of cropping system. So now I got a very simplest meaning of cropping system. It may be defined as sequence or order in which crops are grown on a piece of land over a fixed period of time. Means what are the major crops that are grown in a particular area over a fixed period of time. So there are two kinds of cropping systems. One is monoculture cropping system. Other is multiple or intensive cropping system. There are primarily two kinds of cropping systems that you can remember. So what is monocropping? It is not new to you. Monocropping or monoculture or continuous cropping, they have same meaning. Sometimes people get misled that monocropping means growing one crop in a year, or monoculture means growing just one crop in a year. A lot of confusion is there. I scanned the literature and found that monocropping or monoculture are synonymous, and they are synonymous to continuous cropping. So it is the planting or sowing of a single crop in the same patch or same piece of land year after year. You are taking just one kind of crop year after year, then it is monoculture or monocropping. That means if you take 2 rice in a year, that is also monocropping or monoculture. If you take 3 crops, that is also monoculture. If you take 1 crop of rice this year in one particular field, next year also you take rice, third year also you take rice, that is your monoculture. So how it originated? Basically in the modern time, this monoculture originated in Green Revolution, where thrust was given on cereal crops, heavy doses of fertilizers and pesticides were used, irrigation intensity was also increased, and seeds of high-yielding varieties were used. And so was the case of machine. So a lot of new technologies were placed in Green Revolution, and that resulted in monoculture, means continuous cropping of cereal crops. Like if you take rice, wheat, rice, wheat, rice, wheat. Many people consider this also as a monoculture because both these crops belong to same family, almost similar height. Of course, some taller rices are also there, but wheat also used to be taller. But on an average, their nature is same. regarding yields, regarding growth pattern, regarding consumption of nutrients or nutrient requirement. This rice and wheat are almost similar. So therefore, even rice wheat is also kind of monoculture. It can be talked as monoculture. So actually, green revolution resulted in reduction of labor costs, the doubling of grain yields, lifting millions of people out of poverty, and creating food self-sufficiency for nations such as Mexico and India. Definitely, this monoculture in green was the result of green revolution, but it has given some positives also, like it made us self-sufficient in food grains. So that is a positive, but there are more negatives than the positives. So you can see this picture here in the slide. Corn means continuously you are taking corn crop or maize crop or rice crop. That is your continuous cropping. So for example, rice fallow, this is a rotation. If it is adopted for several years, then it becomes monoculture. Rice, even rice wheat can be monoculture. Maize is also possible. Maize can be grown in Kharif, Rabi, as well as in Jaid. So maize can be taken in Kharif as well as in Rabi or Jaid. For example, even if you are taking a legume crop like moong, and then keeping the land fallow, then again moong fallow, for several years, this also becomes your monoculture. Moong, monoculture, pigeon pea fallow, pearl millet fallow. So if you adopt these rotations continuously for several years, then they will be kind of monoculture. So besides doubling food production, it has caused more damage than the good. So you can see depleting the soil from the micronutrients. Now you have seen the fertility of the soil, particularly in Indo-Gangetic belts, Punjab, Haryana. These areas are having very low levels of micronutrients. Biodiversity is reduced because if you reduce the above ground biodiversity, it will result in reduction in the below ground biodiversity. So even your biodiversity is reduced, air and water pollution is there, shortage of water is also there, and increased use of fertilizers, pesticide, and reduced availability of water. So many problems have been the result of the monoculture. The above examples suggest that monoculture has both merits and demerits. So what are the advantages of monoculture? Growing rice, wheat continuously or growing rice continuously. What are the advantages? So first is machinery specialized for the crop can be used to maximize efficiency of crop planting and harvest. So you need not to buy several machineries because you have one crop. So for one crop, what kind of thresher is required? What kind of sowing implements are required? You can have it. So in monoculture, it specializes for the crop can be used to machine. I'm sorry. This machinery can be easily used in monoculture. Chemicals such as herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides can be used to target the specific weed, insect, and microbial pest of the monocrop. So in one crop, you have always same kind of weeds, almost same kind of insect pests, and so on. So first thing is that you get enough knowledge to control these insect pests, and secondly, you are having knowledge of kind of herbicide, insecticide that can be used. Instead of knowing so many chemicals and so many insect pests in different crops. So from that angle, it is considered as an advantage. Fertilizer system can be developed to meet the nutrient needs of the crop by applying the nutrients at specific development stages. So if one crop is continuously grown by a farmer, he becomes expert in that crop because he has to deal with the single crop. So therefore, he knows what kind of nutrient in what quantity and at what time should I use. So that makes a farmer's better expert, and system becomes more smooth in monoculture. Specialized varieties are developed to efficiently use light, moisture, and other environmental resources. If you have less number of crops, just one crop, and dominating in one area, particular area, then specialized varieties can be developed depending upon the problems, stresses, and limitations, and also resources. With monoculture, maturity and dry down of all plants within a variety is synchronized. So most of the time, the crops will mature at one particular time. So operations, different operations become easier. This allows for a single harvest with reduced loss of grain due to spoilage. So there are a number of advantages, but at the same time, there are equal number of disadvantages also. Or rather, I can say it has got more disadvantages than the advantages in total. When you run monoculture for a decade, 2 decades or 3 decades, then that system will never be sustainable. So, but still farmers are adopting it, and there may be reasons for adoption. But let us check the disadvantages. Despite so many advantages you have seen, it has got some disadvantages, and 4 are the important disadvantages that can be further broken into different points. Increased risk of insect pests and diseases. Now, somebody can tell me how come this risk of insect pests and disease increases in monoculture? Yeah, Naveen. Why there is?
Hello, yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Anybody can speak?
Sir, they are developing resistance to that particular insecticide, sir.
Okay. Any other?
They simply want the same host, and the dormant stage which are remaining can be the same cycle is going on.
Yeah, definitely. If you grow one kind of crop continuously, that means the you can say germs or bacteria, viruses or insects that cause problem or health problem in the plants, and they will remain in the soil, they will remain in the environment, they can remain on the bunds or plant residues, and they reappear or they appear again when you plant the same crop. So the problem of insect pest disease is more because of leftovers, certain their eggs, their spores, and variety of propagating material of the microbes causing harm will be there. Similarly, you will have more increased weed pressure, increased economic risk, just one crop, and suppose it is one variety. So many times a particular variety may be tolerant or may be susceptible to a particular disease or insect, then this variety will be totally wiped out. If you got, for example, in wheat, if you get just one variety and there is more problem of yellow rust in the wheat, then it will damage all the areas under a particular variety. So that is the problem. Therefore, varietal diversification is equally important as the crop diversification. So increased economic risk may be there, just one crop. And finally, soil fertility problems are also there. So overall, you can see the disadvantages are it eliminates crop and soil biological diversity, reduction in the biodiversity. If you grow great variety of crop, more variety of crops, instead of one crop, if you take 2 crops, 3 crops, 4 crops, or different crops in your field, then your biological diversity above ground and below ground will improve. And I can tell you here that biological diversity is very, very important to achieve targets of sustainable agriculture. In any system, degrades soil structure, just one kind of crop continuously. The roots go to a common depth. So always root exploit a particular zone of the soil. And therefore, just taking one kind of crop, and that is mostly cereal, which are shallow rooted. So it degrades the soil structure, increase susceptibility to soil erosion by this, because if the structure is disturbed, if there are no aggregates, no good aggregation in the soil, structure is destroyed or affected, then thus this kind of soil will be liable to be eroded. Then soil fertility problems will be there, that we will discuss in detail. What are the soil fertility problems due to monoculture? Increased use of inorganic fertilizers and pesticides. One crop, you have to use more and more fertilizers and pesticides. As already discussed with you, the decline in factor productivity, particularly in cereals, the nitrogen use efficiency, agronomic nitrogen use efficiency has decreased. This due to continuous increase of the inorganic fertilizers. Increased risk of disease, insect pests and weeds, increased economic risk and decreases wildlife habitat. Because in monoculture, people are mostly taking cereal, and they are not very tall plant. They are not very tall plant, so it decreases wildlife habitat also. If you have seen wheat field or paddy fields, they are not that much bushy, so wildlife cannot hide in monoculture areas. But if it is diversified, say any agroforestry system where you take variety of crops, or intercropping system where you take a different height of the crops. So in those areas, this wildlife, particularly rabbits, or I don't know what is included in wildlife, but definitely intercropping will promote more wildlife. Reduction in soil quality parameters, as already discussed, reduction in organic matter if you have just one crop, and aggregate stability is low, increased soil erosion, increased greenhouse gas emissions, and ultimately decreased yield potential and yield stability. So these are the problems with the monoculture. Then what should be done? What are the alternative options to monoculture? Alternative options is crop diversification. And crop diversification can be achieved by planting more number of crops in a year, but these crops should be different nature of the crops. This is one. And second is by intercropping systems, and also by agroforestry system, we can diversify the production systems. So diversification is important. So it involves species diversification, means different varieties of crops or the different types of crops. And diversification of varieties or ecotypes is also important. Same variety should not be grown continuously. Let us change the varieties. Even in one season, one farmer should not take same variety in all fields. Let us have different varieties. Highly diverse cropping system that more closely mimic the diversity of natural ecosystems are more resilient and environmentally sustainable due to their biological diversity. If you see the natural ecosystems like forest ecosystems or areas where there is very little interventions or interference by human beings, those areas have very healthy plants, good plants, and wild animals. Everybody is happy there. And populations are at optimum level. They are neither wiped out and they do not dominate the others also. So everybody is happy if you have minimum disturbance. So similarly, in our agro ecosystem, we should, if we have variety of cropping systems, or you see variety of crops and diversity, it will definitely sustain the soil and should be good for the environment, economics, and everything. So diversity, biodiversity is very, very important. Now, alternative to monoculture is crop diversification, and it can be achieved by adopting multiple cropping systems. So one is your monoculture system, other is multiple cropping systems, or you can call it multiple culture also. Sometimes it is called as multiple culture. Multiple cropping system growing 2 or more different crops on the same field in a year. In 1 year, you can take 2 or more crops, but they should be different. They should be different. You can take them at different times, or you can take them at one particular time. 2 crops can be taken together. That is your intercropping system, and they can be taken in sequence. That is your crop rotation or sequential crop. So therefore, multiple cropping systems are of two kinds, intercropping systems and sequential cropping systems. So what are the advantages? Overall, the broader advantages is spread economic risk. If you have intercropping system or two crops in a year, if there is some damage or some harm to a crop, the other crop will compensate for it. Reduce incidence of insect pests and diseases. That is the result of diversification. You have seen, if you have monoculture, this problem is there. But if you have multiple cropping, then this problem may be reduced. Better weed control due to diversification and employment. So you will have 2 or 3 different varieties of crops in a year. So therefore, year-round employment may be achieved by multiple cropping. You can see there are so many systems. This intercropping can be practiced in sugarcane, it can be practiced in maize, cotton, particularly in widely spaced crops, sunflower. And also there are different types of intercropping, row intercropping, strip intercropping, mixed intercropping, and relay intercropping. So we'll see what are those. But you tell me what is this before you in the picture. It is written on the top. It is written on the top. This is sugarcane. And in between sugarcane, you can see mentha. What is the scientific name of mentha? Anybody knows? What is this mentha crop? Anybody has any idea about this crop? Yeah, Kavya, you know about this crop in sugarcane?
No, sir.
Any other student? Any other student from agronomy? Tanmay,
Yes, sir.
what is this crop, intercrop?
Sir, sugarcane.
One is sugarcane, one is sugarcane.
Plus mentha.
The plant
Yes,
which
sir.
is having narrow leaf and longer leaf is your sugarcane. This is sugarcane. And what is in between rows, interrow? Anybody?
Sir, this is mint, mentha arvensis.
Yeah, exactly. So why are you not speaking? It is mint, peppermint. What is scientific?
Sir, this aromatic oil crop.
Yeah, it is aromatic oil crop. And what is the
family? Lamiaceae family.
Okay. And how this aromatic oil is extracted from the plants?
So steam distillation.
Steam distillation. Correct. Correct.
Yes, sir.
What are the uses of the oil extracted from this aromatic oil?
Sir, medicine uses, aromatic purpose uses in various means so perfume they are uses, and they are repellent also.
Tell me last thing about this crop. What is the name for the oil? Scientifically or in general, what kind of oil is obtained from aromatic plants, including this peppermint? Peppermint, mentha is the genus, and there are 4 or 5 species. Mentha piperita. Mentha piperita is for mint, and mentha spicata, mentha spicata. There are 4 species. Japanese spear mint is also there. So there are 4 or 5 species. I expect agronomy student to study some aromatic plants also. This is very important for agronomy student as a crop. This mentha crop. You should read it from books. So what is the name for the oil? Like if it is mustard oil, like it is if it is groundnut oil, it is called as vegetable oils or cooking oil. So what is the name for oils obtained from such kind of plants? Anybody? It is a challenge to you. Anyway, I think you don't. No, not at all. Any other guess? All right, no problem. It is called as essential oil. These are called as essential oils. And now, don't ask me what is essential oil. It is your job to find meaning of essential oil. What do we mean by essential oils? But oils obtained from these kind of plants, aromatic plants, and there are variety of even your tulsi, tulsi Ocimum sanctum, or Indian basil or basil. It also gives you aromatic oil. Eucalyptus plant. There are so many plants which give you essential oils. So please learn what is essential oil, and at least there are many other citronella. This kind of knowledge you should have. Citronella, Palmarosa oil. These are grasses. Certain grasses also give us essential oils. So at least 4 or 5 grasses named, their cultivation. Similarly, mentha, muesli. There are many these medicinal and aromatic plants. So actually, you are unfortunate that you don't have a course on aromatic and medicinal plant, because they are also part of agronomy. There is one institute called CMAP. What is the full form of CMAP? Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants. So that belongs to CSIR. And CSIR, they have one center in Lucknow and one in Bangalore, and one is near Pannagar. They are releasing this variety of mentha. And so what I suggest you all, that it is difficult to get books or latest things. You go to website of CMAP and try to find some literature, some bulletin, how it is propagated, this mentha, citronella, Palmarosa, and 1 or 2 more important crops of India. What is the time of their sowing, planting, how they are multiplied, or what is the propagating material? Is it seed? Is it stem? Is it root cuttings? How they are propagated? Please learn that. What is the fertilizer requirement and how they are processed? They are part of agriculture. They are part of agronomy. They are cultivated at larger scale, these mentha and many other crops. So please do have some knowledge of these medicinal and aromatic plants. I intentionally put this slide. So this kind of practice is there in Tarai belt of Uttarakhand, UP, and some parts of Haryana. So it is planted in the month of February in North India, and then after February it is harvested in June, July, and then as somebody told, distillation is done to remove the oil, and that oil has several uses, particularly in perfume industry, and it has huge demand from France. India exports some of this, and if somebody has tasted pan, if you go to pan shop, the white, some white color material, which has cooling effect, very cooling effect. If you take a leaf of this peppermint or mentha plant and just press it and put it in your mouth, you will feel very cool, very cooling effect. Even if you sit around these plants, you will have some cooling effect. Anyway, so intercropping. Intercropping can be done in widely spaced crop and also in narrow crop, row crops. That is called as row intercropping. So there are a number of options, and you can see another kind of intercropping. This is wheat plus lentil. You can see 2-3 rows of wheat and 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of lentil. This is also possible. And you can see this again, chickpea. Chickpea, 2 rows, and then wheat rows. So wheat, chickpea, but it is possible when you have some row ratio. It is not that alternate row you can have wheat and chickpea. You can have 2-3 rows of chickpea and then 2-3 rows of wheat. That is row intercropping. Again, one can have mustard and wheat also, mustard and chickpea also. And you can have several intercrops with sugarcane. So this is your yellow sarso in sugarcane. This is autumn planted cane. Cane can be planted in northern India 2 times. One is in the autumn season, that is in the month of say 15 September to 15 October. It is planted, and one can have potatoes, mustard, or your yellow sarso, or even some other crops. There are many options for this, and wheat also. Wheat can also be planted in this. So this is also a cropping system. So intercropping is the space-dependent form of multiple cropping, growing 2 or more crops simultaneously on the same field. And crop intensification is in both time and space dimension. Time is known as temporal, T-E-M-P-O-R-A-L, temporal, and space is known as spatial dimensions. There is intercom. Intercom is inter-community. Intercom is inter-community competition during all or part of crop growth. So there can be competition between 2 crops, a main crop and your intercrop. Farmers manage more than 1 crop at a time in the same field, in intercropping. Now, choice of intercrop. What are the criteria based upon which we should choose the crop? Selection of taller crops with short growing crops. So such kind of combinations can be made. Growing of bushy crops with erect growing crops like mustard and green peas, field pea, mustard and field pea. Crops with fast growth should be intercropped with slow growing crops. Intercropping of deep-rooted with shallow-rooted crops. So these are kind of principles or guidelines. Crops of shorter duration may be grown with long duration crops. Combination of legume and non-legume is better. Associated crops should have at least allelopathic effect on each other, and preferably crops of different families be selected. So these are the principles of guidelines for intercropping. Types of intercrop. Mixed intercropping, here crops grown simultaneously with no distinct row arrangement. Just you take the seed of 2 crops and just broadcast it. Row intercropping, crops grown simultaneously in different row arrangement. I have shown you wheat, chickpea, wheat, lentil. Strip intercropping, crops in different strips wide enough to permit independent cultivation. So in this case, in row intercropping, you take few rows, but here you can take more number of rows, say 10 rows, 15 rows of one crop, and then 10, 15 rows of another crop. That is your strip cropping. Relay intercropping, crops grown in relay, so that growth cycle overlap. Means when you are going to harvest a particular crop, and then before the harvest of this crop, you can plant another crop. That is your relay intercropping. Advantages are there for intercropping. Dependence on only crop is avoided. Wildlife is favored. Reduction in the outlay for fertilizer, particularly if you have legume. There is much greater flexibility of the distribution of labor. If you have 2 crops, possible to recover investment, availability of harvest can occupy much more labor. The farmer of little economic resources can produce a large variety of useful products. So these are some of the advantages. There are some disadvantages of intercropping. Competition can be there. So actually for all kind of practice, any practice you take in agriculture, there may be pros and cons, merits, demerits, advantage, disadvantage. So we need to look at a subject in totality. Particularly you are a student, you need to write exam. So you should know these things, advantage, disadvantage. Many times questions come for you. Competition among plants for light, nutrients, water, and space. So this is also there. Possibility for allelopathic influences. Harvesting of one crop may damage the other. If you are harvesting one crop, then machinery or some damage can be done. Difficult to incorporate a fallow period. at times difficult to mechanize this cropping system because the requirement for two crops may be different, the machine requirement. Increase in ET, loss of water, possible over-extraction of nutrients, leaf, branch, fruit or water drop, fall from taller elements to the shorter ones, higher relative humidity, the microclimatic changes, possibility to favor a proliferation of harmful animals. The wild animals can be more. Now, it has got certain limitations also that intercropping cannot be practiced everywhere. So it has got some limitations. Each of the many possible intercropping patterns is appropriate for a particular range of conditions and inappropriate for others. So one particular, you have 4 different intercropping systems. So all 4 cannot be adopted in one place. So they will vary with the conditions. Each intercropping pattern is usually chosen to alleviate a particular limitation in resources. Intercropping is generally associated with small land holdings. Intercropping systems make it difficult to cultivate between those. Now you would surprise or you would laugh at me that why sir is teaching us intercropping and multiple cropping, crop rotation and so on. This is just to give you a little background. Otherwise, basic purpose could have been finished in 2-3 slides. That how these crop rotations are useful in soil fertility management or maintenance. What is role of flagging? So that can be told in 2-3 slides. But I wanted you to know little background of the different cropping system. Therefore, I'm just teaching you this subject. I don't know if you got it in some other courses also. Now we go to the sequential cropping system after see monoculture, multiple cropping system in multiple intercropping and sequential cropping. Now we see sequential cropping, also known as crop rotation. It is opposite of monoculture. So crop rotation is a plant sequence of growing different crops in the same field. Rotations are the opposite of continuous cropping or monoculture, which is growing the same crop in the field year after year. That is monoculture. Now you got one definition from Soil Science Society of America. A land management system in which a sequence of crops is grown in recurring succession, again and again. You get a particular sequence and follow that sequence of crops year after year. That is your crop rotation. So sometimes, dear students, whenever you write competitive exams, if you give a reference, so your answer will be a bit different from others. If you can remember definition of SSSA 2008 and somebody asks you to define crop rotation, and if you give a reference, then it makes your answer more authentic, more worth, and you may get better marks for giving some references if you are sure. Now, crop intensification is only in the time direction. Here, there is no intercropping. You need to take one crop at a particular time, the next other crop, the next other crop, depending upon the year of the rotation. Rotation can be for 1 year. You can have 2 crops, 3 crops, or even 4 crops in 1 year. And then it can be for 2 years. Some rotations are there for 2 years. Then every 2 years, those rotations are rotated. Then rotation can be for 3 years or 4 years. Then according to that, first 4 year will be completed in 4-year rotation. And then the same sequence of crop will be repeated in next 4 years. That is your rotation. So crop intensification is only in the time dimension, no inter-community competition like in intercropping. Farmers manage only one crop at a time in the same field. But next time he has to manage a different crop. Now question comes, why to rotate the crop? What are the drivers that force a farmer to adopt crop rotations? Why it is required? What is the need to adopt crop rotation? Purpose is, what are the purposes? To improve soil condition or health, because monoculture has deteriorated the soil health. So what are the disadvantages of monoculture? If you reverse that, they will become the purpose or need of the multiple cropping or crop rotation. To improve soil condition or health, to reduce the average rate of erosion, because it will improve soil structure. To reduce fertilizer need, some legumes can be incorporated in the rotation. It is always a part of IPM, is crop rotations, to manage weeds, to increase nutrient use efficiency. Crop rotations will always improve nutrient use efficiency, enhance soil organic matter content, and increase water use efficiency. So overall, you can see that if you adopt crop rotation, they protect or preserve your natural resources like your soil and water, and they also improve efficiency of your inputs like fertilizer, irrigation, or some other input. So crop rotations are very, very important. And they also sustain the food production or crop production, besides having positive effect on environment. So what are the principles of crop rotation? I think many of you are from agronomy and are aware for principles of crop rotation, but others who are from different disciplines, other disciplines can see it. So crops belonging to the same natural family order or family should not be followed one after other, or even in intercrop. The deep-rooted crop should be followed by shallow-rooted crops, and vice versa. Why it is so? Deep-rooted crops should be followed by shallow-rooted crops. Why it is so?
So because the deep-rooted crops will uptake the nutrients from the deeper layers of the soil rather than exploiting the upper layer, which can be utilized by shallow-rooted crops after that.
Very good. Excellent. So, and that is the role of crop rotation in soil fertility. What is the role here? It is in soil fertility, you can see, because there is better utilization of nutrients. The roots will explore the whole volume of soil. They will not extract nutrients from a limited volume of soil. So therefore, the nutrients will be removed uniformly from the soil profile. Otherwise, if you have crops with the same fixed root or shallow root, so they will always explore the same volume of soil. They will not go to the deeper layers of the soil, where also you will find certain nutrients. So those nutrients will remain unused or unutilized, rather they can be lost if they are not being utilized by the plant. Exhaustive crops should be taken after the restorative crop. Exhaustive crops mean those who remove more nutrients from the soil, and restorative crop who remove less nutrient and rather they add certain nitrogen. So leguminous crops are your restorative crops, should be followed. So they should be followed in rotation. Green manure with legume should be included in the rotation, and disease susceptible crops should be followed by disease resistant crops. Alternating crops with different peak requirements of labor, water, and fertilizer should be included in the crop rotation. So many things are there in the crop rotation. Long duration crops should be followed by short duration crops. Crops with problematic weeds should be followed by clean crops. Multi-cut crops like fodders and other dissimilar crops. Broad-leaved crops should be rotated by narrow-leaved crop or family can come. Crops with taproot should be followed by crops with fibrous root system. It helps in proper and uniform use of soil nutrients from different depths. This is already covered. Both wide space crop and thickly planted crops should be included in rotation for control of weeds. Effect of previous crop on succeeding crop should be considered for obtaining maximum yield and good quality of produce. Selection of crops should be problem-based. So please go through these principles of crop rotation. Selection of crops should suit the farmer's financial conditions. In case of rain-fed farming, some minor winter crops requiring less moisture like pulses may be grown. So overall, you can go through these principles. Now, what are the factors that affect the crop rotation? Means what are the factors that determine the crop rotation? Means a particular crop rotation can be adopted under a particular soil or climatic conditions. Then what are the factors that will affect a rotation? That this particular rotation, for example, if you consider rice wheat rotation, why it is adopted in certain areas? What are the reasons? We need to know. So there may not be just natural reason, natural causes or climatic causes. There can be some economic factors also, some social factor also. Social factor means, for example, if you ask a Sikh farmer who is doing farming in Punjab, he will never grow tobacco. So although in Punjab, tobacco can do good, it can be produced. So similarly, there are some social factors, some economic factors also that affect the crop rotation. Natural environmental condition like wind, precipitation, humidity, light or temperature. So for example, precipitation, if you do not get sufficient precipitation, you cannot grow rice, or vice versa. If you get high rainfall, then you can go for rice. Similarly, soils, light, very light soils, the crops will be different than the heavy texture soil. So many, light or temperature or light will also affect the selection of the crop. Availability of labor, irrigation facilities, you cannot grow irrigated crop like wheat under dry land conditions if water is not available. So irrigation facilities, location of the farm, if it is located near the city area, then people would prefer forage crops or vegetable crops. Availability of fertilizer will also affect the crop. If fertilizer is not available, you cannot grow crops that require more fertilizer. Type of soil, type of farming, size of the farm, profitability, marketing and processing facilities, government policy and finance. So sometimes government encourages a particular crop, sometimes not. So government policy also affect your minimum support prices and so on. So you please go through it, factors affecting crop rotation or determinants. It can be also called as determinants of crop rotations. What factors determine that a particular rotation will be adopted in a condition? There are two classes or two types of crop rotation, or they can be classified into two based upon number one, according to the residual effect on the soil. Exhaustive rotation, they will remove more of nutrients, more of water. Restorative rotation will help maintaining soil fertility. So they are restorative. They do less damage to the soil. According to their period or succession of crop, fixed rotation and flexible rotation. Fixed rotation means you have 2 years rotation and you are repeating year after year that rotation. That is fixed rotation. And if you make certain changes, 1 or 2 changes, that is your flexible rotation. Suppose you are taking, say, rice, wheat, moong, or say maize, wheat, and moong. So next time you can take maize, mustard, moong. So that is your flexible rotation. Just change one crop, that becomes your flexible rotation. Advantages of crop rotation. Crop rotation improves soil structural stability, mainly because of proliferation of roots. These roots explore the different layers of the soil, kind of tillage is being done by them. And also root exudates. You get variety of root exudates, different varieties of root exudates, and those root exudates bind the particle together. So soil aggregation is improved by these. And sometimes one crop, maybe if it is leguminous crop, so it can add some organic matter through leaf fall or litter fall. Improves nutrient use efficiency because of increased soil organic matter levels, particularly if you have legumes in the rotation are to be fitted because crops are different. So at least suppose 2 years rotation is there. So at least one legume should be there. Provides better weed control, improved nutrient use efficiency, and disrupts insect, pest, and disease cycles. So these are the advantages of crop rotation. And now we come to the main point, that is the value of crop rotation. So value or importance of crop rotation is in different sense: plant nutrition, soil fertility improvement, insect control, disease prevention, weed control, and water quality. So if you see from the plant nutrition or soil fertility point of view, each crop uses different types and amounts of minerals from the soil. So if you have crop rotations, then the preference of crops will be different for the nutrients. For example, you can take the crop which require less nitrogen and the crops which require more nitrogen in the rotation. So suppose you take cereal legume rotation, that will give you the best result, cereal legume rotation. So in this case, the soil fertility will be improved and it will not be affected adversely. And also, for example, if you take potato, Potato removes more of potassium, particularly many cereal crops, plus potato, sugarcane. These crops loves too much of potassium. So after cereal crops, you can take some other crop which require less potassium. Less potassium, mustard can, some other succeeding crop can be taken, not necessarily legume. Crops from other family can also be taken. There are number of oilseeds, number of forage crops that can be taken. Different crops replenish different minerals. It is also important because as in the first point, you have seen that a particular crop will accumulate more amount of a particular nutrient. Preference goes to a particular nutrient. Similarly, this if you take different crops, then different minerals will be added to the topsoil. If you mix their residues, or they can bring the minerals to the top layer. If it is deep-rooted crop, so it will extract certain minerals which are not there in the top layer. So they will extract, and the roots are distributed throughout the horizon. So what I mean to say that in the upper part of the root, that mineral will reach to the also to the upper part of the soil. A different crop will sometimes return missing minerals to the soil as the plant dies and composes. So overall, you can see that there are a number of advantages so far plant nutrition or soil fertility management is concerned due to crop rotations. Soil structure improvement. So if your soil structure is improved, then definitely nutrient availability and uptake will improve. Because improved soil structure, as I already told you, will result in improved water holding capacity, improved microbial activity, and improved root activity. So rotation preserves or improves soil structure. Crops have different root structures and grow to various depths. By rotating, the soil is not submitted to just shallow depth crops, but deep diggers or deep-rooted crops that will slowly deepen the topsoil. So overall, adoption of it has been proved. There are many examples, many research papers. I'm not showing here how rotation improves soil structure. Even at micro level, research has been done. I'm just sharing the conclusions or main part of the research. The effectiveness of rotation at boosting soil fertility depends on the legume. How long it is there, whether part of it's harvested before it is plowed. Means the main contributor in crop rotations are legume crops. How many crops have been fitted in the rotation? How long a particular crop has been grown in the rotation? And what fractions or what portion of the legume crop have been added into the soil. So there are many things. It is simply not that you just grow a legume crop, you can derive the full benefits and then harvest the stover part. The maximum benefit can only be derived when you incorporate the residues. Suppose you have a legume crop, and as you know that most of the legume or all legumes give you pods, PODs. Pods are the fruits of legumes. And then if the pods are harvested or picked up, and then the remains of the plant should be incorporated in the soil, then maximum benefit can be attained by growing the legume. So growing the legume is not enough. What proportion of their biomass is returned back to the soil? Now question comes, how to rotate the crop? What are the practices? What are the practices in rotation? So crop should be rotated on at least a 3 to 4 year cycle. 3 to 4 year means 3-year rotation or 4-year rotation is more advantageous. If you have 1-year rotation like rice, wheat, and maize, it is not maize. In some area, maize can be taken as a fodder crop. It is possible to grow maize after wheat, but as a fodder crop. So you can take rice, mustard, and mung bean. So rice, mustard, mung bean is 1-year rotation. So if you rotate it every year you have to rotate it because this is 1-year rotation. Then also after say 4, 5, 6, 10 years, there may be problem in the rotation. So rotation has to be for 3 years or 4 years so that every crop is rotated after every 3 or 4th year. So a crop of maize planted this year is not planted in the same field for the next 3 to 4 years in a 3 to 4 year rotation. Ideally, altogether, different crops should be used each year as insect and disease that affects one crop will also likely affect similar crops. For example, cabbage and broccoli are of the same family and should not follow each other. Crops are changed year by year in a plant sequence. So changing of the crop is necessary. In planning consideration or practical sense, legumes are generally a beneficial preceding crop. So whenever rotations are being started, so let us start with a legume crop. When legumes are used in a rotation, there must be some contribution of nitrogen. And when scheduling for nitrogen management of the next crop, then the nitrogen which is received from the legume plant should also be considered. For example, before rice, if you take green manuring crop, generally 60 kg less nitrogen is recommended for rice. If you have taken a leguminous crop or green manure crop, say before cultivation of rice, then you need to add 60 kg less nitrogen than the recommended nitrogen. So that is the advantage. So these considerations should be there in succeeding crops. And soil fertility levels should be regularly monitored, means soil testing should be done, and utilize crop residues more effectively. So lastly, I have 2 slides for role of legumes in crop rotation. Just now you have seen that if you are going to have crop rotations, you must incorporate certain legumes in the rotation. If it is long duration rotation, say 3 years, 4 years, then 2 different legumes should be incorporated or included in the rotation. If it is 1 year rotation or 2 year rotation, then at least 1 leguminous crop has to be there. So now we see the role of legumes in crop rotations. Addition of nitrogen, everybody knows that legume crops, they fix nitrogen from 60 to 80 kilogram nitrogen per hectare. These are the average or mean values of leguminous crops. Annual leguminous crops, 60 to 80 kg nitrogen per hectare. And not only nitrogen, they increase the availability of phosphorus, potash, and micronutrients. Their roots go deeper into the soil. And from the deep layer, roots extract the micronutrients and other nutrients and bring them to the plant biomass, above ground biomass, and also in the above part of the root. So therefore, they increase the availability of the other nutrients. And when they decompose, upon the decomposition of leguminous crops, there is release of certain acids. And those acids can solubilize the fixed phosphorus, particularly this tricalcium phosphate can be solubilized by the acids released upon the decomposition of leguminous plants. So therefore, they increase the availability of phosphorus, potassium, and micronutrients, lessening the disease and pest problems. So this is true that they reduce the incidence of insect pest and disease. Francis and Clegg, 1990, stated that the greater the difference between crop in rotation in sequence, the better the control of pest. Means if you repeat crops at a wider time, at a longer time, in 3 years or 4 years, then insect pest and disease control would be much better than the rotation of 1 year or 2 years. That is the meaning of this. Pests that are controlled by crop rotations have the following characteristics. Means those pests which can be managed by rotation should have these characteristics. They should qualify these points. Then rotation can help to control or minimize incidence of these insect pests and disease. The pest inoculum source must be from the field itself. This includes soil and root dwelling nematodes and soil-borne pathogen. Means the pathogen or the inoculum should be the source of disease or pest should be soil itself. Means seed should not be the source. If seed is the source, that will come from outside. So a narrow range of the host that is also there. Means it survived only on few hosts. Incapability of surviving long periods without a living host. Last slide, better control of weeds. There are many examples In Nebraska, rotating corn and grain sorghum with broadleaf crops is an effective method of controlling sugarcane. This example is from USA, but Indian examples are also available where weeds are controlled by crop rotations. Like I gave you example, if you continuously have problem of Felis minor in rice wheat rotation, so in place of wheat for 1 year, if you take barsim as a barsim crop, then there will not be any plant of Felis minor in the barsim. And then the germinating seed will die because barsim is grown in water. Initially, if you know, many of you are from agronomy side, the establishment of barsim is done the way you do establishment of rice. First of all, you put water in the soil, plow the land in water, and puddling is done, puddling is done. After puddling, the seed is broadcast on the surface. Seed is broadcast on the surface, and then a shallow layer of water is kept initially for germination, and then also. So you have water, and the germinating seed of the grass normally die, and barsim seed do not die. So therefore, and there may be, I don't know, there may be some allelopathic issues also, but in barsim plots, you will rarely find any Felis minor. So this presentation is over. Now your questions are welcome.